Welcome back to Digging Deep, the podcast where we offer bereavement bites for time-pressed professionals and where we explore the trends, challenges, and stories that are shaping the future of the death care profession in Canada. I'm your host, Heather Kiteley, President and CEO of GFD and second-generation funeral director. Today, we're recording live from the British Columbia Funeral Association AGM and Conference in Vancouver, British Columbia. This is an incredible gathering of professionals dedicated to advancing the way that we support and serve families through loss. In this episode, we're going to be diving into the most pressing questions of our profession. Why are fewer families thinking about pre-planning, even as its value has never been more critical? But before we jump in, if you're enjoying the Digging Deep podcast, make sure to follow, leave us a comment, and share this episode with someone in your life who might find it valuable. Your support helps us to keep bringing these important conversations to the forefront. Joining me today is Jason Meidl. Jason, welcome.
Thanks so much.
Awesome to have you here. So Jason is a seasoned funeral director with extensive experience in the funeral profession, serving as the managing director and owner of Creston Valley Funeral Services, as well as director and owner of Kootenay Lake Crematorium in Creston, British Columbia. His commitment to providing compassionate and attentive care to families during their most challenging times is the cornerstone to his career. Jason began his career in funeral service by earning a funeral director diploma from the Canadian College of Funeral Service in 2017. Since then, he's remained dedicated to supporting grieving families with empathy and professionalism. In addition to his roles at Creston Valley Funeral Services and Kootenay Lake Crematorium, Jason contributes to the advancement of the funeral profession as a director and the Apprenticeship and Education Chair for the BC Funeral Association. He also serves as an advisor on the board of directors for Bridgeway Funeral Services, a company focused on preserving the independence and legacy of family-owned funeral homes. Welcome, Jason. We are so excited to have you here today. And we are talking about a subject that, as our listeners will know, because I've talked about it a million times, is very dear to my heart. I'm a pre-need nerd, self-professed, and love talking about it. So I want to sort of set the stage for our discussion by talking a little bit about some of the research that GFD has done. And phase 2 of our consumer research has shown that awareness in pre-planning is down. So down from 58% to 52%. So that means half of the people in Canada have no idea. Let's just sort of put a fine point on that. Half of the people in Canada have no awareness of pre-planning. And even though perceptions of its importance, so even with that, the perception of the importance, so what Canadians tell us about how much they perceive it being important, have increased from 64% to 69%. So 70% of people say this is really important and only half of them really have any idea. So let's sort of start there. Why do you think that more Canadians recognize the importance of pre-planning their funeral and getting their arrangements, whether it be funeral, burial, etc., but fewer are taking action? What do you think's going on there?
You know, I'm thinking there's definitely a cost associated with pre-planning and pre-need. Okay. There's a perceived idea that it's a high cost. So I know in my experience in a small rural location, most of the time when people are coming in with pre-needs, they're walking off, they're coming into the office right then and there wanting to do it, and most of them are quite elderly too as well.
Do you find, I just want to ask you sort of a funny thing in there, when I was working on the front line and doing pre-need all the time, I found that a lot of people who walked into the funeral home would walk in after just having visited the dentist. Is that something you've seen where you are?
I haven't necessarily seen that.
Okay, so now you have to start asking people.
Now I got to think now if that's definitely for sure. And it's crazy, and I don't know if it's a rural thing, an urban thing, but we just have people all the time just walk in off the street, and I'm just here, I want to pre-plan and pay.
Impulsively, they wake up that morning and hey, I'm going to go visit the funeral home.
And we do a lot of marketing, and we'll do seminars and things like that. We do Facebook and social media to show kind of the benefits of pre-planning. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, it's just these random people coming in, and a lot of times it's people that probably should have done it a long time ago, because they're already very close. They've got a terminal illness, for example.
Yes.
So it's a great question, and I don't know the right answer to it.
It's a bit of a mystery, isn't it? And I think it's very interesting, this idea. Like, a lot of people, when I was actively doing seminars in communities and going out and chatting with people will be like, okay, Heather, so at what age should I do my pre-arrangement? And it's, I mean, if you take any time to really think about that question, it's kind of a funny question, because as we know, death has no age, right? Death is something that we could face in any moment at any time. And so I used to, like, people would be like, what do you think? So like 74, maybe when I retire? And I'm like, so if you have an idea of exactly when you're going to die, when do you think that is? People would be like, oh, I don't know, right? The time that you should do it is the time that you are motivated to do it, right?
Yeah, and I do find it's impulsive. Being in a small town, we're quite a small town. We're about 5,000 people, 15,000 with the surrounding community. So as a funeral director, everybody knows who you are. There's no getting away from that. You can't hide in the shadows.
You can't go grocery shopping in your pajamas,
you
right?
You go to the grocery shopping and you know everybody, or you're saying, oh, I'm sure I know who that person is. Sometimes it's a long visit to the grocery store.
It is, yeah.
And what I do find is that people will come up and just go have it's the funeral director. Oh, we know you, Jason. Oh, we should be pre-planning.
In the grocery store, they'll say that.
We should have done this a long time ago, or we want to do something. Okay. And so it's almost it's a trust thing too, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think it's showing value for our profession as well. But it's interesting to hear those statistics and see, people know they should, but people aren't doing it. And why? Yeah. Why is that? Yeah.
And the other thing I think that's interesting, going back to the grocery store discussion, is that, and I grew up in a smaller town, and that was sort of, I'd go out with my dad, and like everyone would stop. It would take forever to get through the mall, right? But one of the things that people say a lot in the grocery store, and folks, some of our members or my friends that run small funeral homes in small communities will say that the common thing they hear is people will say, I've been meaning to come in and get it done, right? Yeah. And so what is our natural response to that as funeral professionals? We say, just call me when you're ready.
Yeah. And
I always say, just don't do that. It's like a cry for help, right? When people meet you in the grocery store, they're like, I really want to do it, but I'm afraid to call you. That's kind of how I look at it, right? And so I always used to tell my folks that if you get that question in the grocery store, say, hey, I have some time next Tuesday at 3:00. Why don't you come by, right? To give that permission for people to actually come in. Is that something that you...
Yeah, that's definitely the most common thing I hear.
Yeah.
And I'm getting better at doing exactly that, is setting a time with that family. I think as funeral directors, sometimes we're just too nice.
Oh, and we don't want to be...
We don't want to be in position. We don't want to say, of course, come in when you're ready. And what we need to be doing is doing more along those lines. So I get at the grocery store. We do a lot of community events, like doing speaking for hospice and things like that. And oftentimes there you'll get someone come up, I'm meaning to come in. I need to come in and see you. So I think it's better they're asking for it at that point.
Yeah.
And so they know they need it. And some of these people that are saying that are already pre-planned, for example. They might have a pre-plan somewhere else, and they want to have a discussion, or they just want to have that talk. And typically what I find is when they come in, even if they haven't prepaid, almost always they want to prepay by the end.
Yeah.
And
it's
once they see the value, and we do a lot of home ones too, so I'll go to a lot of people's homes and go to their homes and sit down with them.
Yeah.
And same thing as well, they just want to get it taken care of. But the statistics are really interesting to hear that.
I want to go back to what you said earlier when you were talking about this barrier of cost.
Yeah.
And I think that you're correct. I think that people think, if I call up Jason, I'm going to have to drop $15,000, right? And everyone has a better use of that $15,000 while they're fine, right? I could be going on a trip. I could be doing whatever. And so I think that as we're talking about awareness and letting people know that you can just go ahead and come in and get things organized, and there's so many different ways that you can look after that cost. You can look after the cost now, you can look after it over time, you can look after it afterwards. So you had said a minute ago that when people come in and see you, typically they always want to look after that cost by the time that they're done. So how does that conversation happen that way?
I think so, and I always say I'm a funeral director, not an insurance salesperson, so that's my key one there. And I do all the pre-needs at our funeral home. And because what I find as well in a small town is that we tried having somebody outside do it, and people don't want to talk to them. They want to talk to the local funeral director. They trust us. They want to do that. So typically when they're coming in, we typically use an insurance-funded policies. We use GFD. Full disclosure.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
We also carry a true stage as well. So
Yeah.
we carry, because we're a small town, we have to kind of have that breadth there. But typically when I sit down with a family, I go through, typically we always start with, let's just pre-plan. Let's just talk about who you are, what you want, what are your wishes, tell me about yourself. And we kind of start like that.
Yeah.
And then I come in after and it's like, okay, is this something we want to take care of after?
Yeah.
And typically most people want to do that.
Yeah.
And the other big one, and I typically do as well, is the reason I like insurance-funded policies is I always stress to our families that this is a good thing to do, especially because we don't know where we're going to be in 10 years or 15 years. So what happens if you're in Winnipeg? I always say Winnipeg because it's cold there, but
because why would someone leave the beautiful?
That's right. Why would you leave the
BC?
beautiful Creston Valley? And then my point to them always is that this is your policy. So you can take this policy with you. I tell all my families, if you're going to leave Creston, come see me. I will help you find a funeral home where you're going that maybe should be similar in cost.
Yeah.
But letting them know that kind of gives them that assurance that they're not just giving the funeral home that money. So I do think also it's part of our job as a profession, and I think we're getting better at it again, is showing our value.
Yeah.
Showing the value of what we do. So yes, there's a cost associated, but what does our families get as a value for that?
Yeah. And I think in talking to families about that, you're addressing another barrier that can often exist, is that people feel like if they're going in to make their prearrangement that it's committed, they can't change it, right? And through that conversation and through that education, letting people know that of course you can change anything as you go, right? I think that's perhaps one of the things that keeps people from, moving forward and working directly with a professional on it. And I think that's maybe why people go other places, right?
Yeah.
To either buy insurance on their own and I think too, when we talk about cost, is that people think that cost is the only thing, right? Yeah. And so they'll go and they'll buy a funeral policy, or they'll buy life insurance, or they'll put money aside for whatever. And the magic that happens when people do a prearrangement is the combination of the money and the plan together, right?
Yeah.
And when you have just money, if money solved the problem, I don't think that we would have a problem. We wouldn't even need to do a prearrangement, right? But talk a little bit about that magic that happens when people take the time to come in to see you, they put the plan, and they fund it together.
I think there's a huge sense of relief a lot of times for these families, realizing that they've taken care of it.
And it's not as bad as they thought it would be,
not as bad as
right?
they thought it was
People
going to
walk out
be.
going, oh my gosh, that was like way easier. That was actually kind of fun.
And it's typically not a long process.
Yeah.
So what I find is that these families, a lot of times too, when they're coming in, is they've had an experience where someone passed away and they had prepaid. And they go, wow, that was so easy.
Yeah.
It was so simple. We want to do that, say, for our kids or for our family. Also giving them that choice too as well. So families, they'll come in and they want to, when we're starting, I don't start with, let's pay for it. It's always, let's just talk about you. Let's see what you want to do. What do you value? What do we want to do for you when that time comes? And so they have that sense of, a sense of knowing that that's been taken care of. And typically we always do get people to come in that they're only pre-planning because they know that it's going to come pretty quick. Right?
So it's imminent, right? Someone's got a diagnosis or and those are hard, right?
Yeah, and those are ones too that oftentimes they'll say, why didn't I do this before? Why did I have to wait to have this news to do that? And we do a lot of those.
I'm sure you have done what I have done, which is, going into the hospital and sitting bedside. And the overriding thought I have when I had those arrangements was that I had failed those folks. And the reason I felt that I had failed those folks is because when someone is dying, they shouldn't be talking about this. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
They should be sitting, there's precious time that's slipping through everyone's fingers really quickly, and here they are talking to me, right? When if I had only done a better job of reaching out and letting them know or helping them do this when everybody is fine and everyone is well, so they're not using that precious little last bits of time.
Yeah, that's all right. And in some ways, though, too, I might choose to disagree a little bit.
Please
because,
do. Yeah.
For me, and I do that quite often, meeting with someone who's imminently passing away or palliative, and the ability for me to sit down with that person and get to know them. Now, I wish they had pre-planned ahead way before, because it makes more sense. But as a funeral director in a small town where we do everything from the transfers to the embalming to the meeting with the families to the service, I act as an officiant too. So it's a really 360 all the way around. So for me, a lot of times it's a big honor to meet that person beforehand. I've done it quite often. I might spend 2 or 3. I spend more time with them than I would typically with someone that had, in their 40s, 50s at a pre-planning.
Yeah.
Because part of it for me is getting to know that person, so that when we do have the service after, it's a lot more intimate, a lot more connection with them. So there's both sides of it, but I do understand that you wish that person had done that previously.
I do. I just wish that they were using their time to differently. But I see what it is you're saying, and so we're gonna, obviously some of our listeners are funeral professionals. They'll have had these experiences, they'll understand it. But if there's folks that are listening that have not had that experience, I just want everyone to imagine for a second what that's like. Having these. It's almost very intimate, right? You're having there's an intimacy with an imminent situation that doesn't exist when you're having, everyone's well and but when you're sitting there and you're talking to somebody who is either it's going to be in the next couple of weeks, or even stranger now, where it is, and I say stranger because it's very odd for us, is when the date of death is planned.
And we do those quite often.
Yeah. Well, I know the statistics here in BC are higher than anywhere else in Canada.
And to be honest, those are one of my, I know a lot of funeral directors that are uncomfortable with doing pre-arrangements with someone that has MAID that's going to be coming. I personally, I don't say I enjoy it, but I love doing those arrangements because I really get to know that person. I sit down with them, and because it's one of those, it can be a touchy topic for some people and some family members. So for me, it's my way to start serving that family ahead of time.
Because you may find, and have you found, that there's sometimes where there's disagreement about moving forward with MAID, and so you're dealing with that, the fractiousness that might be.
And a lot of times, and always what I do when I'm dealing with these families is I always make a point to ask the family members how they're doing, because a lot of times they're not being asked. So the person, that's committed to having MAID being done may have made peace with that, but sometimes the families aren't. So getting to meet that person ahead of time, getting to meet the family, it does really help kind of as we go forward with that. It's same as sitting into someone who's palliative that we're pre-arranging with. It's just but with that being said, like I said, some of us aren't comfortable doing that. It's just not in our wheelhouse. Personally, I don't mind it, and I don't want to say I enjoy it because it's not something that should be enjoyable, but I do find it really honoring and something I like to do sometimes. So
MAID is so interesting in what I have seen its impact. The impact on society is one thing, but the impact on our sector has been very interesting. And there's the certainty that up until recently has always, so death is uncertain, and that's been the certainty for us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like the fact that you're meeting with someone and they may have a diagnosis, but you don't exactly know when things are going to happen. And so that changes a little bit in terms of how you as the funeral director, how you're psychologically, talking to them and compartmentalizing the fact that the strangeness about that conversation and what that reality means. But taking that uncertainty away and creating certainty, I think has been really hard for a lot of us, right? For a lot of our folks to be able to think or be able to manage the difficulty of what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think it just shows as a profession we are evolving and we need to evolve. I'm a fairly new funeral director, to be honest with you. I've only been licensed since 2017.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of these things, I'm coming at it from a different lens of someone, this is my second career. So I don't have the previous, I don't want to say baggage, but the previous expectations of what a funeral director should be doing.
Right.
So we do things a lot differently because there was a joke when I came in, I'm wearing a tie today. I don't really often wear a tie anymore.
Did you wear that just for our folks?
For the
we are honored.
But we don't, because we're evolving, and in my community, it's it's a farming, it's an agricultural community. So oftentimes I'm just in a short sleeve shirt with no tie on.
Right.
So it's that evolving, and as a funeral director, is learning how to do that is a big thing. And that's also where we need to evolve and show our value, which then directly translate to, if we can show our value, then it's a lot easier for people to want to pre-pay.
Yeah. And I think what you're talking about is really the fundamentals of building trust in your community, right? Yeah. And I think you and I talked about this last night. I think that in a rural community, if you are reflecting the values of the community and you're working to be part of that community, and as you say, you're doing all of it, then you can increase trust a lot faster than in other communities. Is that what you've seen?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I don't have the experience. I've worked in other funeral homes in a larger city, so it was a bit different.
Yeah.
Definitely in the rural area that I work in, and I think there's a goal for anybody who's in a rural location, especially when the size of the town that it is. That trust is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's also, there's a double-edged sword there. We're always under a microscope.
Yeah.
So as a funeral director, we are always, even our transfer staff know that everybody knows who they are.
Yeah.
So there's an expectation that you are a funeral director all the time.
And hard for families too, right?
Yeah.
For your kids.
Yeah.
And I grew up with that.
Yeah, and my kids are really good with it. I always joke because they spend they'll come to the funeral home after school.
Yeah.
We've had, their swim club and their soccer club's been at the funeral home during movie. Also, we just kind of made it a really kind of like that. So we built that trust that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely is different in a rural community.
Yeah. And I would say part of that double-edged sword is the reality of burying your friends and neighbors and family.
It is a huge one because typically I know most people. I just had an experience, and my neighbor passed away. We took care of him. We take care of his wife quite often because she's right next door to us. Mm-hmm. And so I spent a lot of time with him in the hospital. I brought his dog up to him. I was also the funeral director, but there is a line that we have to cross in a rural area just because we have no way not to. Mm-hmm. So I just, I brought he's sitting in bed. I brought his dog into the hospital, pulled a few strings, brought his dog to him the day before he passed away, and then went back to the hospital the next day and brought him into our care.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think that what you have just demonstrated is one of the things that we really want our listeners to, especially our listeners that don't have exposure to the death care sector and professionals, is to just really see the amount of care that happens in these communities and the amazing things that you do, and also the tender moments that happen for rural funeral professionals that are different. There is no compartmentalizing anything in your world, right?
No, there really isn't. And it's when we say we're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we really are. And
it's a lifestyle profession, right?
It is.
It's a lifestyle job.
In our particular location, we don't use answering service. It's us that take the phone call because people don't want to talk to somebody, especially in a small town. If I put it under an answering service, they get quite upset. They don't want, well, why? Who are you? Where's Jason? Where's Alicia?
Right.
Why are we talking to you right now? So we really are. And even technology has changed things so much too as well. I get messages on Facebook from families saying, hey, Jason, can you give me a call, or I'll they'll directly come to my house. So it's one of those things that it definitely is all in a rural community.
Yeah. Let's close with what would you like to say to folks who might be listening who are curious about pre-planning and what it means? What would you like? Let's speak directly to them for a second. What would you like to say to them?
I think, I always would like to encourage people to just explore it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean there's a commitment, but have a chat, go into your local funeral home, talk to somebody, get to know them first. Yeah. And that's a big one too, is making that step into that funeral home. Right. And that's the biggest one. And just going and talk, or having, the other big one too is, I always encourage families having that talk, or even talking about it.
Like having the talk before you even talk to
don't even take the funeral home out of the equation. Actually have that discussion with your family, with your loved ones. The amount of people that I sit down with, and you probably had the same experience, they come in and they said, oh, I have no idea what mom or dad wanted. We weren't allowed to talk about it. Yeah. We have no clue. Yeah. And then the ones that do come in, the peace that they have, because they've had the conversation. They know, well, mom specifically told us she wants to do this, 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 and this, and we better do this.
Yes. So but the comfort that people get from that.
Yeah, and that's the big, was talking about it. So I wonder if there's statistics where you say it's very, it looks like it was, if I remember correctly, it was weighted in that more people knew about it, thought it was valuable, but less people wanted to go ahead and pay for it. Mm-hmm. So obviously people are starting to have those conversations. So now it's translating those conversations. Well, maybe now go into a funeral home, sit down. I think, and I speak for most of our profession, is most of us are happy to have somebody come in and just sit with me. The amount of time, I've got a gentleman that's teaching me how to knit. So I took care of his spouse, and so now he comes in every Tuesday and he brings in his knitting and we sit down for half an hour. So now we're a rural location, so it's a little bit different. You might not get away with that. But just having those conversations and knowing that we're funeral directors, we're people.
Like the most amazing people.
We're just average people. We deal with the same things everyone else does. We have, it's a hard job. It's a fulfilling job. But yeah, having those talks and just going into a funeral home.
Yeah. Amazing. Hard to believe we are at the end. I feel like we could
go.
be talking about this for a really long time, but thank you so much for joining us
Thanks for having me.
This episode of Digging Deep. As we've heard today, the pre-planning paradox is real, right? There's this desire of understanding the importance and this lack of awareness or lack of motivation to try and maybe fear, who knows what's going on, but really I think that message of for folks that funeral directors are people.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? And I would say the universal thing I heard when people would leave after talking to me about their pre-arrangement was, oh my gosh, that was so much easier than I thought it was going to be, right? And you almost had like a connection with those people that did last for a lifetime, right? Although nobody taught me to knit. I think that's amazing.
I'm not very good at it.
I'm just picturing you like, and you know, what an interesting message for our I know I'm supposed to be closing off here, but anyway, I just want to go into that for a second. For our folks, you know, in the profession, that there's so many ways to deliver and have these conversations with people. And, you know, the idea that you open yourself up to, hey, let's sit down and knit. And I imagine the conversations that you're having around, you know, his end of life planning and his family and all of that understanding can flow easier over some knitting needles than
and it's that connection. It's that connection, building that trust.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you
so much, Jason. If you found today's discussion valuable, please be sure to follow, leave a comment, and share Digging Deep with your colleagues or anyone anywhere that you find might find this conversation helpful. Your support helps us to continue to bring important conversations like this to the profession and to the public. Until next time, I'm Heather Kiteley. Keep on digging deep.